This is shuttle launch control at T-minus 3 hours and holding. We're at Launch Complex 39 at the Kennedy Space Center. We're at Launch Pad 39B. Space Shuttle Atlantis awaits launch once again this morning. We're now in the final 6 hours of the countdown activities for the launch of mission STS-115, the first mission since return to flight to resume construction of the International Space Station. The countdown is being controlled from Firing Room 4 at the Launch Control Center, and we are currently on schedule for launch at 11:15 this morning. At T-minus 3 hours and holding, with 1 hour 40 minutes remaining in this planned built-in hold. We're still awaiting the arrival of our 6-member astronaut flight crew to enter the dining room for breakfast. There are 6 astronauts who will be aboard Atlantis and en route to the pad very shortly for their launch to the International Space Station. Aboard will be the P3, P4 truss segment in the payload bay, the second set of solar arrays, and batteries. We're about to enter the dining room now. We see the crew is entering the dining room and is now at the breakfast table. And shortly after breakfast, we'll be headed to the suit-up room. The commander and pilot will get a weather briefing. Mission specialist Heidi Piper, along with mission specialist Joe Tanner. Our commander, Brent Jett, along with our pilot, Chris Ferguson. Our mission specialist from Canada, Steve McLean. And our mission specialist, Dan Burbank. So this will actually be their third time through this, having done it in TCDT and a launch attempt yesterday. So this time, the third time's got to be the charm. This is shuttle launch control at T-minus 3 hours and holding. We're seeing the final inspection team on the mobile launcher platform, the last stop on their walk down the entire 380-foot tower. They entered the launch pad this morning at about 4:24. That was at the beginning of the 3-hour built-in hold. They have several objectives while they're there. The most important is to assess the health of the external tank, as we've been saying. They check the integrity of the thermal insulation, look for any ice or frost formations, and anything that would be an effect of having the super cold propellants on board the tank. The liquid oxygen is at minus 297 degrees, and the liquid hydrogen at minus 423 degrees. And the tank is 154 feet tall, but actually shrinks by 6 inches once the 526,000 gallons of cryogenics are on board. The tank weighs approximately 57,000 pounds when empty, about 1.6 million pounds loaded with fuel. The external tank is the largest element of the space shuttle, measuring 154 feet tall by 27.6 feet wide. And the skin of the tank is only about 1/8 of an inch thick in most areas, but it still withstands the more than 6.5 million pounds of thrust during launch. The team also measures temperatures on various other parts of the space shuttle as they do the walk down, and assesses any debris concerns that are either part of the vehicle or on the pad that could be a safety of flight issue. As we saw there with Final inspection team, they use binoculars, a portable infrared scanner, a spotting telescope, and some customized cameras. And they're particularly looking for any ice anywhere on the vehicle, on its interfaces, or in the tank that could break off and strike the shuttle during ascent and liftoff. Some of the cameras that are at the pad, part of the operational television system, can also be used by the firing room team to look at any particular areas that the final inspection team identifies that may need a gander by the engineers here in the firing room, particularly our external tank people. And as we can see, they wear the highly visible day-glow orange protective coveralls that are flame resistant and anti-static, and they also carry with them 10 minutes of breathing air. If the team observes any frost, that's not a problem unless they can see that it's turning to ice. They also did an inspection of the pad area yesterday, looking for anything around the pad that could be a factor that would strike the shuttle during liftoff. And before we got into our first launch attempt, they actually did some inspections of the beach to look for anything unusual, and they'll be doing that again after launch to see anything that might have fallen off the shuttle during launch that might be significant. So that will happen later this afternoon or tomorrow. Also, this team will be reviewing later this afternoon the high-speed film and videotapes to observe anything that may have come off the vehicle, particularly the external tank, which we're most concerned, and anything else that they can see during the early phase of ascent. The team normally takes about 2 hours to perform inspections. It can take longer if they identify any special areas of concern. And they usually concentrate in 4 different areas before they reach the mobile launcher platform: the 255-foot level, the 215-foot level, the 195-foot level, and the 135-foot level of the tower before where they are now on the mobile launcher platform. Tom Ford, who is the NASA lead for the final inspection team, will be delivering his report to the mission management team here in firing room 4 after the team leaves the pad. Still proceeding on time for launch at 11:15 this morning. No issues in work. T-minus 3 hours and holding. 1 hour, 8 minutes, 15 seconds remaining in this planned built-in hold. This is shuttle launch control. This is shuttle launch control at T-minus 3 hours and holding. 25 minutes remaining in this hold. And we're about to enter the suit-up room at the astronaut quarters. Moving over to our commander once again, Brent Jett. So the astronauts will complete their suit up and then head for the elevators and the astrovan for the ride out to the launch pad. At T-minus 3 hours and holding, this is Shuttle Launch Control. And here come our 6-member STS-115 flight crew, leaving the suit-up room, headed for the elevator down to board the astrovan, being greeted by some of the employees in the crew quarters there. And once they reach the ground floor, KSC employees and the news media will also be there to greet them. There'll be some other astronauts on the van with them, including Kent Rominger and Steve Lindsay, who are flying the weather reconnaissance later on this morning. And here they come. Security right behind them, and a security helicopter overhead. Along with a flight crew equipment van. It's just over a 20-minute ride out to pad 39B from the crew quarters, and we'll follow them along as we get video. At T-minus 2 hours, 52 minutes, 30 seconds, and counting, this is Shuttle Launch Control. Here's our Commander Brent Jett coming up onto the flight deck to sit in the left seat. And that will be followed by Joe Tanner, who will sit in seat 5. That's the mid-deck left seat, next to the crew access hatch. Just to amplify a little bit, if we do not launch today, we will not be trying a launch attempt on Sunday, and there are no current plans to launch next week on Monday or Tuesday. The next launch date after today is to be determined.
And NGC copy 563. Copy. NGC at 563. Copy, sir.
Zaragoza, Spain is going to be our prime site for an overseas landing site this morning if the weather permits.
I missed it by about 40 seconds. MS1, Mr. Tanner's on board. Okay, we'll call that. And OTC OVCC. Red OVCC. PLT on board at this time. At 12:03:15. And
Copy.
NGC, copy pilot.
I copy, sir.
Our pilot, Chris Ferguson, now making his way into his seat, and Heidi Piper is preparing. Heidi Piper will be sitting in the mid-deck center seat next to Joe Tanner.
And OTC, S3 on board.
Steve McLean now boarding.
OTC, MS3, com check. And MS3, OTC, I have you loud and clear. Good morning, Joe. Got you loud and clear too, Jeff. Good morning. And OTC, OVCC. Go ahead. MS4 on board, right when you did your comm check just then. Okay, 1222:10. And CQC copy that for MS4.
Copy.
Dan Burbank will sit next to Steve McLean in the aft center seat as our flight engineer. He'll be boarding last.
Good morning, Jeff. Loud and clear. Houston, MS3, country.
MS3 Houston, I read you loud and clear. Good morning, Joe T.
Dan Burbank now making his way to the flight deck to sit in the aft center seat as our flight engineer. He'll be up there for both
Good morning, Jeff. I have you.
launch and landing.
Houston, MS1, comm check.
MS1 Houston, I read you loud and clear. Good morning, Steve.
Got you loud and clear as well, Tony. Good morning.
Entry in 2003 because of insulating foam breaking off and piercing the wing. But once they do take those pictures, they spend a lot of time, quite a lot of man hours looking at each tile to make sure there is no damage. And if there is damage, they can, and they have proved that they can repair those whilst in orbit. Of course, one of the other NASA plans is if there are problems, the 6 astronauts can disembark from the shuttle and go onto the International Space Station until those repairs are carried out.
So you say that in any case, clearly a rendezvous with the International Space Station is planned. So what's the sort of primary objective, if you like, of this mission?
Well, this is the first dedicated mission in almost 4 years to actually repairing and refurbishing the International Space Station. On board the Atlantis, 2 huge solar arrays. They're going to be delivered to the International Space Station, and they will provide a lot more power for the International Space Station. Of course, NASA wants to carry out another 15 missions before the shuttle fleet is retired in 2010 to keep on repairing and refurbishing that International Space Station before this fleet of 3 shuttlecraft is finally retired.
Andy Gallagher at Cape Canaveral, many thanks indeed, and about an 80% chance, says Andy, that the launch will go ahead about an hour or so from now. All right.
Space Shuttle Atlantis, and all systems are go. We're hearing the final countdown is set to begin in about less than 15 minutes from now. In fact, it'll be the 5th attempt to launch the spacecraft after a series of delays, and we'll have live coverage of that liftoff when it happens.
Chief Engineer, verify no constraints to launch. B0T is go. Thank you, Charlie. KC Safety and Mission Assurance.
KC SNMA is go.
Thank you, Lana. Payload Launch Manager. Mike, the Space Station team's looking forward to getting back in the assembly business. We're go for launch. Copy that, Bill. Thank you. Range weather.
Weather has no constraints for launch.
Copy, Kathy. Thank you. And Ops Manager. Launch Director, Ops Manager, the mission management team is not working any issues, Mike. It's a good day to fly. You're clear to launch. Copy. Thank you. Atlantis, Launch Director. Go ahead, Launch Director. Well, Brent, looks like your long wait is over. And so for you, Fergie, Joe T, Dan, Steve, and Zena, we wish you all the best luck in the world. Godspeed, and we'll see you back here in about 2 weeks.
Thanks, Mike. We appreciate those words and the effort to make this launch window. You know, by our count, it's been almost 4 years, 2 return to flight missions, and a tremendous amount of work by thousands of individuals to get the shuttle program back to where we are right now, and that's on the verge of restarting the station assembly sequence. We're confident that over the next few weeks and few years, for that matter, that NASA is going to prove to our nation, our partners, and our friends around the world that it was worth the wait and the sacrifice. We're ready to get to work.
Thank you, Brent. Great words, and good luck, guys. NTD, with that, you are clear to launch this vehicle.
Copy. Thank you.
CLS is go for orbiter access arm recheck.
Atlantis OTC. It's been a long road with a lot of detours, but your patience is about to be rewarded. It's time to fly. Thanks, OTC. We're ready.
Coming up, we'll have a steering check of the orbiter's flight control systems and of the 3 main engines.
Atlantis OTC, close and lock your visors and initiate O2 flow. That's it, work.
Bundeskanzlerin Merkel hier im Gespräch mit dem bayerischen Ministerpräsident Edmund Stoiber auf dem Marienplatz. Dorthin haben auch Sie sich eingefunden, nachdem Sie ja beide schon den Papst auf dem Münchner Flughafen begrüßt hatten. Hier also die Kulisse des Rathauses. Und, liebe Zuschauer, ein anderes Ereignis, das parallel stattfindet, wollen wir Ihnen in diesen Minuten nicht vorenthalten. Es ist der in Kürze erwartete Start der US-Raumfähre Atlantis vom Weltraumbahnhof Cape Canaveral in Florida. Nach 4 vergeblichen Anläufen stehen für die Raumfähre jetzt also alle Zeichen auf Start. Die Crew befindet sich in der Raumfähre. Der Countdown verläuft normal. Es gibt auch keine Probleme mit dem Wetter, wie die US-Raumfahrtbehörde NASA mitteilte. Der Space Shuttle soll wenn alles pünktlich verläuft, in 2 Minuten vom Weltraumbahnhof abheben Richtung internationaler Raumstation ISS. Und dort wartet der deutsche Astronaut Thomas Reiter schon auf die 6-köpfige Crew. Alles bis zu diesem Countdown hat bisher reibungslos funktioniert. Also vielleicht haben Sie auch ein wachsames Auge auf das kleine Bild hier neben uns. Start der Raumfähre Atlantis in wenigen Sekunden. Dafür
for the long-awaited launch of Space Shuttle Atlantis. There it is on the launch pad. We know, of course, the 6 astronauts are in there, strapped in, ready for liftoff. This is actually the 5th attempt of Shuttle Atlantis to actually lift off, get off the ground. We know that on Friday, NASA stopped the launch about 45 minutes, in fact, before the scheduled launch, and that was due to a faulty fuel tank sense, and that's the same glitch that thwarted 2 previous missions. Now, it was originally supposed to launch on its 11-day mission on August 27th, but due to a lightning strike on the launch pad, Tropical Storm Ernesto, a glitch with the 30-year-old motor in an electricity generating fuel cell. Okay, look, let's just have a listen in, I think, where we're seeing all systems go. There it is.
Space Shuttle Atlantis, opening a new chapter in the completion of the International Space Station for the collaboration of nations in space.
Roll program, Houston.
Roger, roll, Atlantis.
Houston is now controlling. Roll maneuver is underway. Atlantis is heading into a heads-down position on course for a 51.6-degree, 137 by 36 statute mile orbit. Atlantis already 2 miles downrange from the Kennedy Space Center at an altitude of 2.8 statute miles. Engines now at 72%, beginning to throttle back up as the vehicle passes through the area of maximum dynamic pressure.
Atlantis, Houston, go at throttle up.
Copy, go at throttle up.
All three liquid-fueled engines are back at full throttle. 1 minute, 20 seconds into the flight. At liftoff, the fully fueled shuttle, boosters and external tank weighed about 4.5 million pounds. It now has burned half of that weight in propellant. Solid rocket boosters are burning 11,000 pounds of propellant every second. Coming up on 1 minute 45 seconds. Standing by for first stage separation of the solid rocket boosters. Atlantis is at an altitude of 129,000 feet, 24 miles in altitude, 25 miles downrange. All three engines are still performing as expected. SRB separation and staging confirmed. All three electrically producing fuel cells are operating as expected, as are the hydraulic systems, the auxiliary power units. Two orbital maneuvering system engines on the tail of Atlantis now assisting with the ascent performance. Those engines will burn for a little less than 3 minutes. 2 minutes 45 seconds. Atlantis 61 miles from the Kennedy Space Center.
Atlantis, Houston, 2-engine Marone.
Copy, 2-engine Marone.
Atlantis can reach Marone in Spain in the event of a single engine failure.
And success on the fifth try of launching Space Shuttle Atlantis. Seeing there just moments ago it took off. We know the mission includes 3 spacewalks and a construction job on the International Space Station. There are 6 astronauts on board. Just looking there at those live pictures from Earth, and then up there looking at the shuttle. We know aboard Atlantis is one of the heaviest payloads, in fact, ever carried into space. 17.5 tons of girders that will be added to the half-built space station. Now, it includes 2 solar arrays that will produce electricity for the orbiting outpost. Atlantis's crew members will make 3 spacewalks, as I said, during that 11-day mission to install $372 million worth of addition. Now, of course, if they hadn't taken off on this day, there would have been a lot of problems because the Soyuz was heading that way on the 18th. But it's been all successful this time, even though this was the 5th try. There'd been a number of problems. The last launch attempt even just scrubbed on Friday, and that was just 45 minutes before. So we're watching very carefully this time, but the weather was on their side and certainly technology was on their side. It appears that the problems they had yesterday with the faulty fuel tank sensor were put right on this day. I think it took them 3 hours or so to fill the tanks, and all systems were good. So there we have successful launch at last, the 5th try of Space Shuttle Atlantis.
20.
Firing chain is armed. Sound suppression water system activated.
10.
Minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. 3 main engines up and burning. 2, 1. And liftoff of Space Shuttle Atlantis, opening a new chapter in the completion of the International Space Station for the collaboration of nations in space.
Roll program here.
Roger, roll, Atlantis.
Houston is now controlling. Roll maneuver is underway. Atlantis is heading into a heads-down position on course for a 51.6 degree, 137 by 36 statute mile orbit. Atlantis already 2 miles downrange from the Kennedy Space Center at an altitude of 2.8 statute miles. Engines now at 72%, beginning to throttle back up as the vehicle passes through the area of maximum dynamic pressure.
Atlantis, Houston, go at throttle up.
Copy, go at throttle up.
All 3 liquid-fueled engines are back at full throttle. 1 minute, 20 seconds into the flight. At liftoff, the fully fueled shuttle, boosters and external tank weighed about 4.5 million pounds. It now has burned half of that weight in propellant. Solid rocket boosters are burning 11,000 pounds of propellant every second. Coming up on 1 minute 45 seconds. Standing by for first stage separation of the solid rocket boosters. Atlantis is at an altitude of 129,000 feet, 24 miles in altitude, 25 miles downrange. All 3 engines are still performing as expected. SRB separation and staging confirmed. All 3 electrically producing fuel cells are operating as expected, as are the hydraulic systems, the auxiliary power units. Approaching 6 minutes into the flight. Atlantis is now rolling to a heads-up position. Traveling 9,400 miles per hour, 352,000 feet in altitude, or 66 miles. Downrange from the launch site, 390 miles. A little less than 2.5 minutes of powered flight remaining. All systems still operating as expected.
Atlantis, Houston, press to MECO, and we're seeing good cooling on Fast Pry Alpha.
Copy, press to MECO.
ET separation confirmed. Atlantis now off of the external tank. Commander Brent Jett will fire the pulse the engines on Atlantis to position it for photography of the tank as it falls away. Beautiful view of Atlantis as it falls away from the tank. You can see the jets firing those reaction control system jets to position the orbiter.
Atlantis, Houston, nominal MECO, OHMS 1 is not required, and no action on the cabin DPDT.
3 main engines up and burning. 2, 1, and liftoff of Space Shuttle Atlantis, opening a new chapter in the completion of the International Space Station for the collaboration of nations in space.
Roger, roll, Atlantis.
Houston is now controlling. Roll maneuver is underway. Atlantis is heading into a heads-down position on course for a 51.6 degree, 137 by 36 statute mile orbit. Atlantis already 2 miles downrange from the Kennedy Space Center at an altitude of 2.8 statute miles. Engines now at 72%, beginning to throttle back up as the vehicle passes through the area of maximum dynamic pressure.
Atlantis, Houston, go at throttle up.
Copy, go at throttle up.
All 3 liquid-fueled engines are back at full throttle. 1 minute, 20 seconds into the flight. At liftoff, the fully fueled shuttle, boosters and external tank weighed about 4.5 million pounds. It now has burned half of that weight in propellant. Solid rocket boosters are burning 11,000 pounds of propellant every second.
7, 6, 5, 3 main engines up and burning. 2, 1, and liftoff of Space Shuttle Atlantis, opening a new chapter in the completion of the International Space Station for the collaboration of nations in space.
Roger, roll, Atlantis.
Houston is now controlling. Roll maneuver is underway. Atlantis is heading into a heads-down position on course for a 51.6 degree, 137 by 36 statute mile orbit. Atlantis already 2 miles downrange from the Kennedy Space Center at an altitude of 2.8 statute miles. Engines now at 72%, beginning to throttle back up as the vehicle passes through the area of maximum dynamic pressure.
Atlantis, Houston, go at throttle up.
Copy, go at throttle up.
All 3 liquid-fueled engines are back at full throttle. 1 minute, 20 seconds into the flight. At liftoff, the fully fueled shuttle, boosters and external tank weighed about 4.5 million pounds. It now has burned half of that weight in propellant. Solid rocket boosters are burning 11,000 pounds of propellant every second. Coming up on 1 minute 45 seconds. Standing by for first stage separation of the solid rocket boosters. Atlantis is at an altitude of 129,000 feet, 24 miles in altitude, 25 miles downrange. All 3 engines are still performing as expected. SRB separation and staging confirmed. All 3 electrically producing fuel cells are operating as expected, as are the hydraulic systems, the auxiliary power units. Two orbital maneuvering system engines on the tail of Atlantis now assisting with the ascent performance.
7, 6, 5. 3 main engines up and burning. 2, 1, and liftoff of Space Shuttle Atlantis, opening a new chapter in the completion of the International Space Station for the collaboration of nations in space.
Roger, roll, Atlantis.
Houston is now controlling. Roll maneuver is underway. Atlantis is heading into a heads-down position on course for a 51.6 degree, 137 by 36 statute mile orbit. Atlantis already 2 miles downrange from the Kennedy Space Center at an altitude of 2.8 statute miles.
Eight, 7, 6, 5. 3 main engines up and burning. 2, 1, and liftoff of Space Shuttle Atlantis, opening a new chapter in the completion of the International Space Station for the collaboration of nations in space.
Roger, roll, Atlantis.
Sun is 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. 3 main engines up and burning. 2, 1, and liftoff of Space Shuttle Atlantis, opening a new chapter in the completion of the International Space Station for the collaboration of nations in space.
Roger, roll, Atlantis.
Houston is now controlling. The roll maneuver is underway. Atlantis is heading into a heads-down position on course for a 51.6 degree, 137 by 36 statute mile orbit. Atlantis already 2 miles downrange from the Kennedy Space Center at an altitude of 2.8 statute miles. Engines now at 72%, beginning to throttle back up as the vehicle passes through the area of maximum dynamic pressure.
Atlantis, Houston, go at throttle up.
Copy, go at throttle up.
All 3 liquid-fueled engines are back at full throttle. 1 minute, 20 seconds into the flight. At liftoff, the fully fueled shuttle, boosters and external tank weighed about 4.5 million pounds. It now has burned half of that weight in propellant. Solid rocket boosters are burning 11,000 pounds of propellant every second. Coming up on 1 minute 45 seconds. Standing by for first stage separation of the solid rocket boosters. Atlantis is at an altitude of 129,000 feet, 24 miles in altitude, 25 miles downrange. All 3 engines are still performing as expected. SRB separation and staging confirmed. All 3 electrically producing fuel cells are operating as expected, as are the hydraulic systems, the auxiliary power units. Two orbital maneuvering system engines on the tail of Atlantis now assisting with the ascent performance. Those engines will burn for a little less than 3 minutes. 2 minutes 45 seconds. Atlantis 61 miles from the Kennedy Space Center.
Atlantis, Houston, 2-engine Marone.
Copy, 2-engine Marone.
Atlantis can reach Marone in Spain in the event of a single engine failure. However, all 3 are still operating as expected.
Atlantis, Houston for Brent, high load duct heater to Alpha/Bravo.
High load duct heater Alpha/Bravo.
Good copy, and we're seeing some ice in the high load fest.
Copy, we'll watch it.
That call relating to the flash evaporator system of one of the auxiliary power units. However, they're all working properly.
Firing chain is armed. Sound suppression water system activated. Atlantis 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. 3 main engines up and burning. 2, 1. And liftoff of Space Shuttle Atlantis, opening a new chapter in the completion of the International Space Station for the collaboration of nations in space.
Roger, roll, Atlantis.
Houston is now controlling. Roll maneuver is underway. Atlantis is heading into a head-down position on course for a 51.6 degree, 137 by 36 statute mile orbit. Atlantis already 2 miles downrange from the Kennedy Space Center at an altitude of 2.8 statute miles. Engines now at 72%, beginning to throttle back up as the vehicle passes through the area of maximum dynamic pressure.
Atlantis, Houston, go at throttle up.
Copy, go at throttle up.
All 3 liquid-fueled engines are back at full throttle. 1 minute, 20 seconds into the flight. At liftoff, the fully fueled shuttle, boosters and external tank weighed about 4.5 million pounds. It now has burned half of that weight in propellant. Solid rocket boosters are burning 11,000 pounds of propellant every second. Coming up on 1 minute 45 seconds. Standing by for first stage separation of the solid rocket boosters. Atlantis is at an altitude of 129,000 feet, 24 miles in altitude, 25 miles downrange. All 3 engines are still performing as expected. SRB separation and staging confirmed. All three electrically producing fuel cells are operating as expected, as are the hydraulic systems, the auxiliary power units. Two orbital maneuvering system engines on the tail of Atlantis now assisting with the ascent performance. Those engines will burn for a little less than 3 minutes. 2 minutes 45 seconds. Atlantis 61 miles from the Kennedy Space Center.
Atlantis, Houston, 2-engine Marone.
Copy, 2-engine Marone.
Atlantis can reach Marone in Spain in the event of a single engine failure. However, all three are still operating as expected.
Atlantis, Houston for Brent, high load duct heater to Alpha/Bravo.
High load duct heater Alpha/Bravo.
Good copy, and we're seeing some ice in the high load fest.
Copy, we'll watch it.
That call relating to the flash evaporator system of one of the auxiliary power units. However, they're all working properly. 3.5 minutes into the launch, 108 miles downrange from the Kennedy Space Center. Atlantis still performing as expected, 54 miles in altitude or 293,000 feet. Now traveling 4,400 miles per hour.
Atlantis, Houston, negative return.
Copy, negative return.
Atlantis can no longer return to the Kennedy Space Center now in the event of an engine failure. However, all three are in excellent shape. Flight control team is continuing to evaluating the flash evaporator system.
L1, Fespri Alpha to off, back to GPC.
Okay, we'll cycle Fespri off, then back to GPC.
Good copy.
That to cycle the flash evaporator system. Again, all auxiliary power units still working fine, as are the electricity producing fuel cells. 4 minutes 45 seconds into the launch. Atlantis is at an altitude of 65 statute miles downrange from the Kennedy Space Center, 225 miles, traveling 7,000 miles per hour. Discussions on the flight loop relative to the flash evaporator system. The suspect, a little bit of water in that unit, but all continues to work smoothly otherwise. 5 minutes, 20 seconds into the flight.
Atlantis, Houston, press to ATO, select Istris.
Press to ATO, select Istris.
Atlantis can reach orbit on 2 engines should one fail now. Again, all three still working fine.
Single engine Ops 3.
Single engine Ops 3.
Approaching 6 minutes into the flight. Atlantis is now rolling to a heads-up position. Traveling 9,400 miles per hour, 352,000 feet in altitude or 66 miles, downrange from the launch site 390 miles. A little less than 2.5 minutes of powered flight remaining, all systems still operating as expected.
Atlantis, Houston, press to MECO, and we're seeing good cooling on Fespri Alpha.
Copy, press to MECO.
That call means that Atlantis can reach a safe orbit on 2 engines now.
That is 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. 3 main engines up and burning. 2, 1. And liftoff of Space Shuttle Atlantis, opening a new chapter in the completion of the International Space Station for the collaboration of nations in space.
Roger, roll, Atlantis.
Houston is now controlling. Roll maneuver is underway. Atlantis is heading into a heads-down position on course for a 51.6 degree, 137 by 36 statute mile orbit. Atlantis already 2 miles downrange from the Kennedy Space Center at an altitude of 2.8 statute miles. Engines now at 72%, beginning to throttle back up as the vehicle passes through the area of maximum dynamic pressure.
Atlantis, Houston, go at throttle up.
Copy, go at throttle up.
All 3 liquid-fueled engines are back at full throttle. 1 minute, 20 seconds into the flight. At liftoff, the fully fueled shuttle, boosters and external tank weighed about 4.5 million pounds. It now has burned half of that weight in propellant. Solid rocket boosters are burning 11,000 pounds of propellant every second. Coming up on 1 minute 45 seconds. Standing by for first stage separation of the solid rocket boosters. Atlantis is at an altitude of 129,000 feet, 24 miles in altitude, 25 miles downrange. All 3 engines are still performing as expected. SRB separation and staging confirmed. All 3 electrically producing fuel cells are operating as expected, as are the hydraulic systems, the auxiliary power units. Two orbital maneuvering system engines on the tail of Atlantis now assisting with the ascent performance. Those engines will burn for a little less than 3 minutes. 2 minutes 45 seconds. Atlantis 61 miles from the Kennedy Space Center.
Atlantis, Houston, 2-engine Maroon.
Copy, 2-engine Maroon.
Atlantis can reach Maroon in Spain in the event of a single engine failure. However, all 3 are still operating as expected.
Atlantis, Houston for Brent, high load duct heater to Alpha/Bravo.
High load duct heater Alpha/Bravo.
Good copy, and we're seeing some ice in the high load fest.
Copy, we'll watch it. 20.
Firing chain is armed. Sound suppression water system activated.
10.
That is 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. 3 main engines up and burning. 2, 1. And liftoff of Space Shuttle Atlantis, opening a new chapter in the completion of the International Space Station for the collaboration of nations in space.
Roger, roll, Atlantis.
Houston is now controlling. Roll maneuver is underway. Atlantis is heading into a heads-down position on course for a 51.6 degree, 137 by 36 statute mile orbit. Atlantis already 2 miles downrange from the Kennedy Space Center at an altitude of 2.8 statute miles. Engines now at 72%, beginning to throttle back up as the vehicle passes through the area of maximum dynamic pressure.
Atlantis, Houston, go at throttle up.
Copy, go at throttle up.
All 3 liquid-fueled engines are back at full throttle. 1 minute, 20 seconds into the flight. At liftoff, the fully fueled shuttle, boosters and external tank weighed about 4.5 million pounds. It now has burned half of that weight in propellant. Solid rocket boosters are burning 11,000 pounds of propellant every second. Coming up on 1 minute 45 seconds. Standing by for first stage separation of the solid rocket boosters. Atlantis is at an altitude of 129,000 feet, 24 miles in altitude, 25 miles downrange. All three engines are still performing as expected. SRB separation and staging confirmed. All three electrically producing fuel cells are operating as expected, as are the hydraulic systems, the auxiliary power units. Two orbital maneuvering system engines on the tail of Atlantis now assisting with the ascent performance. Those engines will burn for a little less than 3 minutes.
25. 20. Firing chain is armed. Sound suppression water system activated. That is 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. Three main engines up and burning. 2, 1. And liftoff of Space Shuttle Atlantis, opening a new chapter in the completion of the International Space Station for the collaboration of nations in space.
Roger, roll, Atlantis.
Houston is now controlling. The roll maneuver is underway. Atlantis is heading into a head-down position on course for a 51.6 degree, 137 by 36 statute mile orbit.
That is 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. Three main engines up and burning. 2, 1. And liftoff of Space Shuttle Atlantis, opening a new chapter in the completion of the International Space Station for the collaboration of nations in space.
Roger, roll, Atlantis.
Houston is now controlling. The roll maneuver is underway. Atlantis is heading into a head-down position on course for a 51.6 degree, 137 by 36 statute mile orbit. Atlantis already 2 miles downrange from the Kennedy Space Center at an altitude of 2.8 statute miles. Engines now at 72%, beginning to throttle back up as the vehicle passes through the area of maximum dynamic pressure.
Atlantis, Houston, go at throttle up.
Copy, go at throttle up.
All three liquid-fueled engines are back at full throttle.
That is 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. Three main engines up and burning. 2, 1. And liftoff of Space Shuttle Atlantis, opening a new chapter in the completion of the International Space Station for the collaboration of nations. Sound suppression water system activated. That is 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. Three main engines up and burning. 2, 1. And liftoff of Space Shuttle Atlantis, opening a new chapter in the completion of the International Space Station for the collaboration of nations in space.
Roger, roll, Atlantis.
Houston is now controlling. The roll maneuver is underway. Atlantis is heading into a head-down position on course for a 51.6 degree, 137 by 36 statute mile orbit. Atlantis already 2 miles downrange from the Kennedy Space Center at an altitude of 2.8 statute miles. Engines now at 72%, beginning to throttle back up as the vehicle passes through the area of maximum dynamic pressure.
Atlantis, Houston, go at throttle up.
Copy, go at throttle up.
All 3 liquid-fueled engines are back at full throttle. 1 minute, 20 seconds into the flight. At liftoff, the fully fueled shuttle, boosters and external tank weighed about 4.5 million pounds. It now has burned half of that weight in propellant. Solid rocket boosters are burning 11,000 pounds of propellant every second. Coming up on 1 minute 45 seconds. Standing by for first stage separation of the solid rocket boosters. Atlantis is at an altitude of 129,000 feet, 24 miles in altitude, 25 miles downrange. All 3 engines are still performing as expected. SRB separation and staging confirmed. All 3 electrically producing fuel cells are operating as expected, as are the hydraulic systems, the auxiliary power units. Two orbital maneuvering system engines on the tail of Atlantis now assisting with the ascent performance. Those engines will burn for a little less than 3 minutes.
Atlantis 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. 3 main engines up and burning. 2, 1. And liftoff of Space Shuttle Atlantis, opening a new chapter. 6, 5. 3 main engines up and burning. 2, 1. And liftoff of Space Shuttle Atlantis, opening a new chapter in the completion of the International Space Station for the collaboration of nations in space.
Roger, roll, Atlantis.
Houston is now controlling. The roll maneuver is underway. Atlantis is heading into a heads-down position on course for a 51.6 degree, 137 by 36 statute mile orbit. Atlantis already 2 miles downrange from the Kennedy Space Center at an altitude of 2.8 statute miles. Engines now at 72%, beginning to throttle back up as the vehicle passes through the area of maximum dynamic pressure.
Atlantis, Houston, go at throttle up.
Copy, go at throttle up.
All 3 liquid-fueled engines are back at full throttle. 1 minute, 20 seconds into the flight. At liftoff, the fully fueled shuttle, boosters and external tank weighed about 4.5 million pounds. It now has burned half of that weight in propellant. Solid rocket boosters are burning 11,000 pounds of propellant every second. Coming up on 1 minute 45 seconds. Standing by for first stage separation of the solid rocket boosters.
Atlantis 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. 3 main engines up and burning. 2, 1. And liftoff of Space Shuttle Atlantis, opening a new chapter in the completion of the International Space Station for the collaboration of nations in space.
Roger, roll, Atlantis.
Houston is now controlling. The roll maneuver is underway. Atlantis is heading into a heads-down position on course for a 51.6 degree, 137 by 36 statute mile orbit.
Atlantis 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. Three main engines up and burning. 2, 1. And liftoff of Space Shuttle Atlantis, opening a new chapter in the completion of the International Space Station for the collaboration of nations in space.
Roger, roll, Atlantis.
Houston is now controlling. Roll maneuver is underway. Atlantis is heading into a heads-down position on course for a 51.6 degree, 137 by 36 statute mile orbit. Atlantis already 2 miles downrange from the Kennedy Space Center at an altitude of 2.8 statute miles. Engines now at 72%, beginning to throttle back up as the vehicle passes through the area of maximum dynamic pressure.
Atlantis, Houston, go at throttle up.
Copy, go at throttle up.
All 3 liquid-fueled engines are back at full throttle. 1 minute, 20 seconds into the flight. At liftoff, the fully fueled shuttle, boosters and external tank weighed about 4.5 million pounds. It now has burned half of that weight in propellant. Solid rocket boosters are burning 11,000 pounds of propellant every second. Coming up on 1 minute 45 seconds. Standing by for first stage separation of the solid rocket boosters. Atlantis is at an altitude of 129,000 feet, 24 miles in altitude, 25 miles downrange. All 3 engines are still performing as expected. SRB separation and staging confirmed. All 3 electrically producing fuel cells are operating as expected, as are the hydraulic systems, the auxiliary power units.
Sound suppression water system activated. Atlantis 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. 3 main engines up and burning. 2, 1. And liftoff of Space Shuttle Atlantis. Atlantis 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. 3 main engines up and burning. 2, 1. And liftoff of Space Shuttle Atlantis. Atlantis 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. 3 main engines up and burning. 2, 1. And liftoff of Space Shuttle Atlantis. 2, 1. And liftoff of Space Shuttle Atlantis, opening a new chapter in the completion of the International Space Station for the collaboration of nations in space.
Roger, roll, Atlantis.
Houston is now controlling. Roll maneuver is underway. Atlantis is heading into a heads-down position on course for a 51.6 degree, 137 by 36 statute mile orbit. Atlantis already 2 miles downrange from the Kennedy Space Center at an altitude of 2.8 statute miles. Engines now at 72%, beginning to throttle back up as the vehicle passes through the area of maximum dynamic pressure.
Atlantis, Houston, go at throttle up.
Copy, go at throttle up.
All 3 liquid-fueled engines are back at full throttle. 1 minute, 20 seconds into the flight. At liftoff, the fully fueled shuttle, boosters and external tank weighed about 4.5 million pounds. It now has burned half of that weight in propellant. Solid rocket boosters are burning 11,000 pounds of propellant every second. Coming up on 1 minute 45 seconds. Standing by for first stage separation of the solid rocket boosters. Atlantis is at an altitude of 129,000 feet, 24 miles in altitude, 25 miles downrange. All three engines are still performing as expected. SRB separation and staging confirmed. All three electrically producing fuel cells are operating as expected, as are the hydraulic systems, the auxiliary power units. Two orbital maneuvering system engines on the tail of Atlantis now assisting with the ascent performance. Those engines will burn for a little less than 3 minutes. 2 minutes 45 seconds. Atlantis 61 miles from the Kennedy Space Center.
Atlantis, Houston, 2-engine Marone.
Copy, 2-engine Marone.
Atlantis can reach Marone in Spain in the event of a single engine failure. However, all three are still operating as expected.
Atlantis, Houston for Brent, high load duct heater to Alpha/Bravo.
High load duct heater Alpha/Bravo.
Good copy, and we're seeing some ice in the high load fest.
Copy, we'll watch it.
That call relating to the flash evaporator system of one of the auxiliary power units. However, they're all working properly. 3.5 minutes into the launch, 108 miles downrange from the Kennedy Space Center. Atlantis still performing as expected, 54 miles in altitude or 293,000 feet. Now traveling 4,400 miles per hour.
Atlantis, Houston, negative return.
Copy, negative return.
Atlantis can no longer return to the Kennedy Space Center now in the event of an engine failure. However, all three are in excellent shape. Flight control team is continuing to evaluating the flash evaporator system.
L1, fast by Alpha to off, back to GPC.
Okay, we'll cycle fast A off, then back to GPC.
Good copy.
That to cycle the flash evaporator system. Again, all auxiliary power units still working fine, as are the electricity producing fuel cells. 4 minutes 45 seconds into the launch. Atlantis is at an altitude of 65 statute miles downrange from the Kennedy Space Center, 225 miles, traveling 7,000 miles per hour. Discussions on the flight loop relative to the flash evaporator system. The suspect, a little bit of water in that unit, but all continues to work smoothly otherwise. 5 minutes, 20 seconds into the flight.
Atlantis, Houston, press to ATO, select Istris.
Press ATO, select Istris.
Atlantis can reach orbit on 2 engines should one fail now. Again, all three still working fine.
Single engine ops 3.
Single engine ops 3.
Approaching 6 minutes into the flight. Atlantis is now rolling to a heads-up position. Traveling 9,400 miles per hour, 352,000 feet in altitude or 66 miles, downrange from the launch site 390 miles. A little less than 2.5 minutes of powered flight remaining, all systems still operating as expected.
Atlantis, Houston, press to MECO, and we're seeing good cooling on Fast Fly Alpha.
Copy, press to MECO.
That call means that Atlantis can reach a safe orbit on 2 engines now. Again, all 3 are still working fine.
Houston, we see a nominal shutdown plan.
Atlantis, Houston, we concur. Your shutdown plan is nominal. Your go for the plus X, go for the pitch.
Copy. Nominal shutdown. Go plus X. Go pitch.
Good copy. And you are single engine press 104.
Single engine press 104.
7 minutes, 20 seconds into the flight. Atlantis can reach orbit on 1 engine now should 2 fail. Again, all 3 still in good shape. The call from astronaut Tony Antonelli here in the flight control room, a nominal shutdown plan means that all of the scheduled activities post main engine cutoff are as expected to photograph the external tank as it falls away from the orbiter. Brent Jett in the forward left seat. Chris Ferguson, the pilot of the mission, in the forward right seat. Dan Burbank between them and behind them. And Canadian astronaut Steve McLean behind pilot Chris Ferguson. Down on the middeck, Joe Tanner closest to the side hatch of the orbiter, and Heidi Stefanish Piper in the down on the middeck with Tanner. Engines beginning to throttle back to lessen the aerodynamic loads on the vehicle as it approaches main engine cutoff. Standing by for that call. And main engine cutoff has been confirmed. EP separation confirmed. Atlantis now off of the external tank. Commander Brent Jett will fire the pulse the engines on Atlantis to position it for photography of the tank as it falls away. Beautiful view of Atlantis as it falls away from the tank. You can see the jets firing those reaction control system jets to position the orbiter.
Atlantis, Houston, nominal MECO. OMS 1 is not required, and no action on the cabin DPDT.
Nominal MECO, OMS 1 not required, and no action on the DPDT. Thanks, Houston.
Space Shuttle Atlantis safely back in space for the first time since October of 2002. Traveling 17,500 miles per hour, downrange from the launch site 1,200 miles. Mission specialist Joe Tanner down on the middeck will be grabbing a Kodak 760 camera that will take the still photos of the external tank. Steve McLean up on the flight deck will grab a camcorder and document the external tank with video. All of that in the few minutes while Atlantis is slowly separating from the external tank after separation just moments.
And that video looks great, Atlantis.
Okay, Terry, glad you're getting it.
This is Mission Control Houston, now watching video that was recorded by the crew on board Atlantis of the external tank after it fell away from the orbiter after main engine cutoff, and the orbiter was in orbit today after an on-time launch at 11:15 a.m. Eastern Time. This video is being downlinked to Mission Control, so imagery analysts and engineering experts can review it and assess the foam coverage on the external tank. This all added to a compilation of imagery and data that helps the experts determine the integrity of Atlantis' heat shield, the thermal protection system, that is in place to protect the orbiter when it enters into the Earth's atmosphere again at the end of the mission. This is Mission Control Houston, continuing to watch video that was obtained by the crew on board the Space Shuttle Atlantis with a handheld video camera being downlinked for engineers on the ground to analyze the external tank after it dropped away from Atlantis.
He's only in the tire. Good afternoon and welcome to NASA's post-launch press conference for STS-115, mission to resume assembly of the International Space Station. I'm David Mould with NASA Public Affairs. With us today is the Administrator of NASA, Michael Griffin, Associate Administrator for Space Operations, Bill Gerstenmaier, Mission Management Team Chairman, Leroy Kane, and Launch Director, Mike Leinbach. We'll start with some brief opening statements and then move right to your questions. And we'll begin now with NASA Administrator Mike Griffin.
Thanks, David. As usual at these events, I will be brief. I just will comment that once again, it's an honor to be associated with this program and with this team and to watch them work. What you saw today was a flawless count, a majestic launch, and it was tough to get here. This vehicle had not flown since 2002. I'm thinking actually 2001, right? This vehicle had not flown in many years, and not everything in the count leading up to this day was easy. And in between, we had to dodge tropical storms and lightning strikes and things like that. But we got here, and it was just a flawless day, and I'm proud to have any part of it.
Thanks, Mike. I'd again like to echo your comments to the Kennedy team and the folks around the country that put the hardware together that got us into orbit. The team did an awesome job. It wasn't easy getting here. They hung together through a lot of adverse circumstances, and they just were a real tribute to the professionalism that's going to take us forward into assembly. We now kind of hand off to the space station team and the on-orbit team on the shuttle side, and they've got a very busy mission in front of them with the EVAs and the activity on orbit as we return to assembly. That will be an extremely challenging flight, the remainder of Atlantis' flight here. The teams are prepared, they're ready to execute, and they're ready to go. I think they're excited and ready and kind of have that deer in the headlight look as they see all this assembly stuff coming forward, and they're ready to go do their job. So again, it's a great tribute to the Kennedy team today, and thanks for all the work they've done today.
Well, it is great to be here. Any day we launch a space shuttle is a great day, in my opinion. The team just did a fabulous job today. I will tell you that I was trying to make some notes about what I might talk to you about when I came over today, but I told Mike I brought my console notes, but it's kind of on console, go for launch, MECO, and there's not a whole lot else in between there. And so I would like to say, though, that I'm here representing the mission management team, and I'm privileged to be able to chair that group of folks in this particular phase of the mission. And it's just an outstanding group of individuals who represent an even larger, outstanding world-class team, in my estimation. And so we had a very clean walk through the countdown today as we watched Mike and his team do all the work. We really didn't have significant issues to work as a mission management team. And after we're finished here, I'll go back over to the firing room, and we will release the mission management team to go back to their home centers. And I will hand over the baton to John Shannon, and he'll chair the on-orbit portion. And I'll be very happy and proud to do that. So it's good to be here today. Mike?
Okay. Thanks, Leroy. I'm here representing Team Atlantis. Great set of folks that have been working on this ship for almost 1,300 days in one state of preparation for flight or another. And they finally got their reward today. It just feels really good. There were literally tears in the firing room. It felt excellent to reward them with this launch today. We also get to represent the payload processing folks here at the Kennedy Space Center who have had the P3, P4 truss here for over 6 years. So they're awfully glad to have their piece of hardware on orbit now too. The countdown itself went extremely smoothly, which probably shouldn't be surprising considering how many times we've tried it. And so I normally report on problems. It was just really, really clean today. We were trying to find stuff to talk about and couldn't. It was just a great countdown. Teams rewarded. It's a great Saturday afternoon in Florida and for the Space Shuttle program and the station program. Thanks.
Okay, we can go to questions now. Please wait for the microphone to come around and state your name and affiliation. Let's try to limit our questions to one, please, at least in the first round, so we can give everybody a chance. And we'll try to get all your questions in during the press conference so we can get these gentlemen back to work. And so we now can start with back here in the middle, please.
Good afternoon. Richard Luscombe from the Guardian of London. The shuttle went into or behind cloud fairly quickly after the launch. Will that hinder any of the camera views from anywhere? Does it make it harder to get a clear view from all the cameras you have of the shuttle?
Let's see, I'll take that one. it was a cloudy view depending on where you were standing or viewing from as a spectator, but we have so many views that it really is not going to hinder us, and we have onboard capability as well. So we have plenty of looks at the vehicle going uphill, and we don't have any concerns in that regard.
Okay, next. Bob, sorry. Second row.
Hi, Tom Costello with NBC News. I know it's early, and we'll ask you this in 4 or 5 hours, but thus far, do you see anything that is of any concern in terms of debris shedding?
I'll take that one too. Talking with the folks before I came over here, the earliest indication that we have of any event in the way of shedding debris going uphill was after 4 minutes mission elapsed time. I believe it was 4 minutes 7 seconds, and there were no events of note before that. Now, I would caution you only that it's extremely preliminary, but so far we didn't see anything in the region of highest concern, if you will. And the things that folks did see in the very, very preliminary look was well into the ascent phase, where we really don't have debris concerns per se.
Because it's not any longer in the gravitational pull that is of concern, is that right, when you're 4 minutes into flight?
Well, essentially, yeah. There's no dynamic pressure. There's no way for the debris to create a critical impact for us, if you will.
To have a threat, there has to be a relative velocity between the debris and the orbiter. And if there's little to no wind, if you will, then there's no way for the debris to pick up a significant velocity relative to the orbiter, and it doesn't matter anymore.
Okay, let's go to Seth, please.
Seth Borenstein, Associated Press, I guess for Leroy. It sounds like you have another ice issue with the flash evaporator, and so often. Is this of any concern? I mean, can you go through what you're hearing and if there's any workaround or just not bother?
Yeah, you probably heard as Atlantis was going uphill, there was an issue with the flash evaporator system, the FES, and initially they selected over a different heater string, and after that, then they cycled the FES, and after cycling it, then it began to work normally. I talked to the folks back in Mission Control before I came over, and the FES is operating nominally. We believe what happened is due to some rain. We've had some water precipitation get into the ducting, and that's not an uncommon thing. We've seen it happen before, so we don't believe it's going to be an issue for the mission.
Okay, let's go back along the wall here to Todd, please.
Todd Halverson of Florida Today for Bill Gerstenmaier. It's been a long hiatus in assembly, and I'm wondering how you feel about being on the precipice of getting back to the station and resuming assembly, and whether you could characterize for us the challenges and difficulties you anticipate in the years going forward.
I guess I would just state it this way. I'm really excited about getting back to assembly. I go over to the SSPF and I see all that hardware that's ready to go fly, and I talk to all the folks that are over there processing that hardware, getting it ready to go fly, and they are excited and they are ready to go put this hardware together. I can also tell you the EVA team that's going to go work this on orbit, the 2 EVA teams, they are really ready to go do these tasks. They've trained a lot in the pools. They're excited about doing this. The mission control teams, both the shuttle and the station teams, are really ready. There's a lot of ground commanding that has to occur in concert with the EVA, and they are excited and they're ready to go do their activities. So you train, you spend all your time, you get ready, and now you finally get to go execute what you've dedicated your life to, and there is nothing better than the feeling of getting to execute what you've really dedicated your life to, and that's what these folks are starting to feel. And today we had Robbie Ashley come to the LCC, and they recognized him as part of the trust processing team, and I think that was especially appropriate that not only had it been a while for Atlantis to fly, but there's been a lot of space station hardware that's also ready to fly. I'll also tell you our partners are pretty excited. I got 4 or 5 emails on the way over here from partners around the world, no matter what time it is. It seemed that they were all watching the shuttle launch, and they all sent me congratulations, congratulating us on getting this launch off. So it's not only the U.S. team that's excited about getting back, but the international team is just as excited as well.
Okay, let's keep going down the side wall here with Tracy down at the end, please.
Tracy Watson, USA Today, again for Bill Gerstenmaier. Can you talk about how relieved you are, I guess, that you didn't have to go to the end of September? I assume that's a benefit for you, if you could address that. Thanks.
Again, I think the way we kind of operate is we hope for the best, but we plan for the worst. So we were ready for whatever came. If we ended up after the Soyuz, we were ready to go execute that. It wasn't what we desired, but we were ready to go execute, and that was fine. So the teams did an awesome job. They got us here, and the weather was good, the vehicle was good, the preparation was good, and we launched. And so it's nice, but we were ready either way.
Still on the wall with Mike Cabbage, please.
Mike Cabbage with the Orlando Sentinel for whoever would like to field it. As you look ahead to the December launch, what, if anything, do you plan to do as far as the eco sensors are concerned? Are you going to go off and look at what appears to be a recurring problem? Are you going to try to better understand what's going on? And what, if anything, are you going to do?
Well, see, I'll take that, Mike. The first thing we'll do is we'll go back and review the data from this tank, and then we will take the next step toward our goal, which is to have a launch commit criteria that is to be go with 3 of 4 without any kind of deviation to detank and retank and that kind of thing. This was an interim step in that process, and so the next step will be another step in the direction of getting to 3 of 4 in the launch commit criteria, and we may be able to get there before that mission in December. We just have to go look at the data and talk about it and see what it means to us.
Okay, let's stay on the wall with Tarek, please, and then up to Jay on the front.
Thank you, Tarek Knock with Space.com and Space News. I think for Bill, we've heard about how challenging this mission is going to be, and it seems like there's many events that have to go in sequence. We've got the mission progress, Soyuz, and then landing. Can you kind of characterize that challenge, and is it indicative of what the rest of the assembly station is going to be?
Yeah, I think it's pretty indicative of what we're going to have in the future here. The shuttle's going to undock, and then we're going to actually have the Soyuz launch before the shuttle undocks, and then in there the Progress will also get undocked from the station. So at some time we'll have the Progress free flying, we'll have the shuttle free flying, and we'll have the Soyuz free flying as well as the station. So there's going to be a lot of spacecraft in orbit around there to keep track of, and we'll be doing the practicing. I think one thing that's neat is when you look at this and you think ahead to some of the exploration activities, when we're going to go pick up the lunar activity and then eventually some of the Mars stuff, these kind of skills of learning to operate multiple vehicles again in space and do rendezvous and prox ops are going to be critical for those activities. So what an awesome training ground that this sequence of events has given our flight controllers and our designers to do the practice for things that they're going to have to do more routinely when we start doing lunar missions and have to do rendezvous and have launches occur in a certain amount of time. So what a great training opportunity this gives us for those exploration folks that are coming online. So we're looking forward to that activity.
Okay, let's go to Jay Barbary on the front row, please.
Actually, Tarek asked my question there to a certain extent, but now I assume that we're all clear with Soyuz. There's no impact. You have full mission, full extension, anything that you need for this flight.
Yep, we're fine. We've got the contingency days available, and if they're needed, we've got the right flexibility to go to what we need to do on orbit. So we've got everything we would have had on the previous launch days, and we're there and ready to go do what we need to go do and see how assembly goes.
Okay, John Johnson on the front row, please.
John Johnson, Los Angeles Times. Bearing in mind the caveats that you mentioned earlier on this debris event, could you give a little more detail on what you know so far? Is it one piece, more than one? When it floated away, did it hit the orbiter? What did it do?
Unfortunately, I can't give you any more detail than that because I didn't get a chance to view the preliminary video myself. What I shared with you was what was passed on to me from the experts, some of the experts who did view it. And I believe, though, that Wayne Hale is going to come talk to you all at 4 o'clock this afternoon, and he will have those kind of details for you, and it will be his great pleasure to share all that with you. I can tell you for sure.
Okay, Mark Crow in second row, please.
Mark Carreau from the Houston Chronicle. Can you tell us what you had to work with on the echo sensors today, and also on the fuel cell coolant loop? What did you leave with, and how does the outlook look?
Okay, sure, Mark. On the eco sensors, we really didn't have to work anything today because our pre-planned procedure included coming back the second day, filling up the tank, and if the sensors behaved as they had in the prior attempt, or in any fashion where the other three were still good, then we would be go to launch. And for all the reasons that we discussed yesterday, and for all the reasons that we put in our rationale for that case. And that's what we had. We came back in today, and Mike's team filled up the tank, and the three sensors that were nominal yesterday were nominal today. Interestingly enough, the sensor that failed yesterday, after we drained the tank, it was somewhere on the order of 4.5 hours before, after that sensor was physically uncovered, where it should have gone what we call dry. It took 4.5 hours for it to go dry. It did go dry, and then when we retanked today, it went wet, and then it followed the simulation commands as it should. So today, it looked like it wasn't failing. But in any case, we didn't have to work the issue because we were within the bounds of the deviation that we had put forward. With respect to the fuel cell operated completely nominally throughout the countdown and throughout the ascent portion all the way up until through the orbital maneuver system OMS 2 burn that we did. And we didn't have any issues with it. It's performing marvelously on 2 phases of the H2 as well as the coolant pump. So just as we discussed, I think the last time we were here with you, that fuel cell is working fine.
Okay, front row, Craig.
Thanks. Craig Cabalt with Aviation Week for Mike Kleinbach. I know you're going to say it's what you do here, but you might want to, from a people and people resources point of view, just kind of quantify the amount of work that's been done here in the last 2 weeks with other flows. This may not be the toughest, but it's probably one of the toughest. And then address how things maybe stack up for December in terms of workflow impact.
Okay, sure. We've been in launch countdown for over 13 days, and so that's unusual. Probably the first time we've gone that long in launch count. But I can tell you, based on what Atlantis has gone through, that it probably shouldn't surprise folks. Atlantis has gone through a lot of modifications. It's a great ship, has had curveballs thrown at her time and time again, not due to any fault of her own. And so the team just rolled with the punches. We felt good going into the count a couple of weeks ago, and dealt with the challenges put forth to us. The team always had their heads up. We had a banner in the firing room today, the 201st ET loading, both combined loading of hydrogen and oxygen. So the team, even though we loaded the other day and had to drain, came back and changed the banner to 201. So they don't lose their sense of humor. They don't lose the pride in their job. It's what we do for a living, as you say, and it's what we love to do. It's something that gets in your blood. I don't know how to describe it. It's probably in all your bloods, too. It's just a fantastic feeling to work in this program. Atlantis is a fantastic ship. The team that got rewarded today, there was one particular lady on the team, Pat Leslie, who has worked on Atlantis virtually her whole career, well over 20 years on Atlantis alone. And we were able to recognize her today because she's essentially the grandmother of Atlantis, and she'll probably kick me for saying that. We all know and love Pat, but it's that type of feeling, it's that type of kinship that we develop here. It's hard to describe. It's just a wonderful feeling, and I get to sit up here and tell you all about it. I don't do a very good job of it. I wish you could go over and talk to the folks in the OPF, the techs and the engineers and the quality and the safety, all the people that work on these ships, because they're so proud of what they do, and roll with the punches when we get hit, and that's what I feel we've done these last 13 days.
Any dominoes on timing and work?
No, Discovery stayed on her processing the whole time, and so no effect with the delay for Atlantis in any future flight right now. It really no effect to us at all.
Okay, let's go down the center aisle here, please.
Tom Walters, CTV News. Just wondering, I'm not sure who'd like to take this, perhaps Mr. Griffin, but there's a Canadian astronaut aboard this spacecraft. The robotic arms on the orbiter and the ISS are both going to be used in the delivery of the truss assembly. I'm wondering if anybody would care to characterize the Canadian role in this mission.
Well, I can do that quite readily, although your own question, I think, pretty much did it. Indeed, everything that we do to manipulate objects on the space station as we continue with this return to assembly is done with, aided by the Canadian arms. The arms on the shuttle that we use for inspection and to manipulate payloads are, supplied by Canada. I've pointed out on several occasions that where human spaceflight is concerned, what we really have come to, without a lot of people maybe noticing, is that what we have is a world human spaceflight program consisting of those nations who are sufficiently advanced to participate and sufficiently interested to participate. We look forward to adding more partners as we return to the moon and prepare for voyages to Mars, but Canada has been a steadfast partner since day one on the shuttle, since before day one on the shuttle, and continues to be a steadfast partner on the station, which I think shows that you don't have to be an extremely large nation in order to find areas where you can make a real contribution. And of course that's symbolized by Steve McLean's flight today, but Steve is hardly the first Canadian astronaut to fly with us, and certainly won't be the last.
Okay, second row on this side, please.
Kelly Young with New Scientist for Dr. Griffin. What has to happen with this flight in order for you to finalize the decision or get more comfortable with the Hubble servicing mission?
Well, I'll make a couple points, and then I'll let Gerst also make a couple if he has any that I dropped the ball on. I guess first point would be, again, we need to go through our inspection timelines, which we're going to do on this mission in concert with several EVAs. We need to really understand how all that works, because when we go to Hubble, we're not going to have station support to rely on. So we need to know that we can inspect the orbiter that goes to Hubble, and we need to know that we have in our hip pocket at least some rudimentary repair techniques, which we've proved out on the last flight. And we're going to need to know that we can effectively utilize the time that we have for EVAs. If we fly to orbit only to inspect, then we won't get Hubble fixed. We also, given our concerns over the ice frost ramps, have said in the past that we won't fly to Hubble until and unless we either are more comfortable with these ice frost ramps than we are now, or actually the path we're on as we're replacing them. We still have a lot of data to analyze in all those respects. We expect to be able to make a decision by November, and when we have it, when we have that final decision, we'll announce it. We've clearly been trying to find a way to fix Hubble rather than to find a way or find reasons where we can't, but we're not done yet.
I don't have anything to add there, Steve.
Okay.
Okay, same row, please.
Brianna Keeler, CNN News Source. What would it take to resume night launches?
Well, actually, we asked ourselves that question starting a few weeks ago, and there's a fair-sized team that has been studying all aspects of that. Actually, we think that in the not-distant future we will be able to resume night launches. We certainly will want a daytime launch for the first flight or first couple of flights of the new ice frost ramp, because we want an opportunity to see how it performs. But in all likelihood, this next launch will be the last launch with the current ice frost ramp, and gathering more daylight data on how an ice frost ramp performs that we don't intend to fly again may not be the most useful thing to do with our launch window. So it could well work out that as the team finishes their examinations that we end up saying we're okay to go at night.
Okay, front row, Irene, please.
Thanks. My question's for Mike Griffin. The issue with the fuel cell and then the echo sensor seem to have sparked some rather in-depth conversations about launch commit criteria, flight rules, and how the hardware is behaving, what you know about it. And I'm just wondering what your take on all that is, and how you personally sort of weighed the issues in a discussion about whether something should be changed, a waiver granted in the moment, in the process of a launch countdown, when you have these established rules that were set up when you were not under the circumstances of launch.
Well, first of all, we were all part of those discussions, so I'll take the question and give you my thoughts, and others may wish to chime in, and many people who aren't at this dais were also part of those discussions. As you've indicated, the discussions we had during this flow, whether it was over lightning strike damage or whether or not to roll back for Tropical Storm Ernesto, or how to deal with the loss of one phase in an AC induction motor on Fuel Cell 1, or eco-sensors, engendered a lot of engineering discussion. That's all good. I mean, that was great. That's the kind of environment that we have created and that we want to have. At the same time, I would say I think we have to now be a little careful that we don't swing the pendulum too far the other way. You can get into situations where everything that anybody has to say seems to have been said, and sometimes 2 or 3 times. And if all the information has been gotten out on the table and people start repeating themselves, then it really is time to make a decision. I would say that we have gone to great lengths, and I hope successfully, after participating in the last 3 flights, I believe we've gone to very successful lengths to make sure that everyone with an opinion feels entitled to air it. We might be in a place where we also need to remind everybody that some of the people who have opinions that need to be aired are in fact the managers who have to make the decisions and live with them. And that management is not the art of taking a poll and determining which side of an issue 51% of the votes fall on. Management is the art of collecting all of the input that is provided and making a reasoned judgment about what conclusion one should draw from that input. Because, and I've addressed this topic on a number of prior occasions because it's important to me, because time that we spend chewing on an issue past the point of productivity is time not spent on other things that might be lying there in the weeds ready to bite us. Economists call this concept the concept of opportunity cost. And we live with it always. We have only so many people, and we have only so much time in each flow. And we need to use that time in the most productive manner possible. And so that's the thing that I think we're going to be focusing on. We had a lot of really great discussion, but we need to make sure that it's all productive. Now, with regard to your issue on varying of launch commit criteria, that's something in any launch, whether it involves humans or an expendable vehicle, a robotic vehicle alone, is something we just hardly ever do, and we didn't do it in this case. We discussed it. because when we looked at the launch commit criteria arrangements that had been made following the launch last year of STS-115 Discovery, where we agreed at that time to go with 3 out of 4 eco-sensors operating after we had done a detank and retank, we looked at that and said, you know, the detank retank part of that may not make the most engineering sense in the world, especially in view of our concerns about putting extra cycles on tanks with foam. And so as we thought about it in the flow, we thought maybe that's not the smartest thing in the world, and we did consider waiving that rule and just going with the good 3 out of 4 that we had yesterday. Now, in the end, there were some concerns that were aired, and so we decided not to. I don't think that you can or should ever have as a goal that you're going to remove all engineering judgment from a launch flow, from a launch count, from a launch operation, or indeed on an on-orbit operation. The rules and the procedures that you work out ahead of time are there to aid you. And almost always, they will be better than what you can think of in the moment. But almost always is not the same as always, and we need to be aware of that. We need to be mindful of the role of the judgment of senior managers and engineers in moving us forward toward a launch.
Okay, third row back in this section, please.
Peter Rail with Southern FM in Australia for Mike or anybody else. Given the problem that you had during the countdown with the fuel cell, and it was subsequently revealed that it had been quite some period of time since that fuel cell had last been run, are you going to change anything in the terminal countdown demonstration test or lead up to run those units to test them before you get to
Well, you're looking at me, but I'm not the right guy to ask, so at least one of these guys is better.
Go ahead. I don't know. We'll think about that. Again, the problem is, you know, we kind of joke it's a light bulb test, right? You know, you test this thing and it works fine, and then it sits for a while, and then you turn it on and it doesn't work, right? So how many times do you have to test it to prove to yourself that it's really going to work, and are you really maybe wearing it out just testing it? So I think we'll go back and look at it again and see if it makes sense to do that. We do have it set in the count prior to the tanking, which was done purposely so we could watch the fuel cells. We do the single cell check on the fuel cells, which we added a couple of years ago, that gives us more insight. But I don't know if we'll have a requirement to go start it earlier. We did run it, I think, in the OPF for 90 seconds in this flow, so it did run for a little bit ahead of time, so we did get a check out. So I don't think you'll see a lot change there, but we'll think about it and see if there's something we ought to learn about it from this. I think the other thing that's been kind of fun for me is, as we run into some of these problems, is I kind of feed into my exploration friends that are looking at the new CLV and the CEV vehicles, and I ask them things about, are they going to have eco-sensors? Are they? I ask them what,
otherwise known as launch prevention devices.
I ask them, what do you do if a hurricane comes? How fast do you roll back off the pad? How fast does it take to get back out to the pad? How many umbilicals are between your vehicle and the launch tower that have to be unmade? How many shifts of work does it take before you roll back? And they kind of look at me cross-eyed, but it's a really unique opportunity that we can actually be flying, and I can ask these guys that are in the middle of writing requirements these questions based on real-world examples that we're getting every day. So what a chance to improve our overall operation by working together between ops and exploration to really end up with the next vehicle that's thought about these things that we live with every day. So we are doing those same kind of questions, but we're even doing them in broader areas than you would imagine.
I'm going to jump in on this. This is our opportunity, and the only one that we at NASA and this nation will ever get, well, not ever, but for at least another generation or so, to be flying out one generation of hardware and be able to collect the lessons from that generation as we design a new generation. Okay, and if we, you know, we must and we will take advantage of these opportunities, and that's what Gerst is talking about, and he's on top of the issue, and I think you can see that. I think you can see that, and that's why we've got him where he is.
Okay, let's go back around the side over here to Lisa, please.
Lisa Stark with ABC News. I know everything looks great right now, and hopefully it'll stay that way by the 4 o'clock briefing. If for some reason the astronauts had to seek safe haven at the station for any reason, what does that mean for the Soyuz? You know, what does that mean for all these other vehicles that are supposed to be coming up and going down?
We pretty much stay on the same track with those vehicle arrivals and departures, just as we've described, and we'd factor in if we need to change anything in terms of the cargo manifest on those vehicles, depending on what we saw, if we had to go do that eventuality. So the basic plan would stay the way it is in terms of a launch sequence, and then we would look at making adjustments to that based on whatever problems we determined that we needed to correct for.
Okay. All the way in the back corner, please.
Hi, Rory O'Neill with Metro Networks. Just to what you were talking about just a moment ago, perhaps it's a question better saved for when you're at wheel stop, but now that you're getting back into starting up assembly again, do you really see this as sort of the beginning of the end of the shuttle program? Is that 2010 suddenly staring you right there in the windshield?
Well, as I guess the person overall in charge, I'll say it's not quite as stark as you paint it. I mean, 2010 is still a few years off, but we are mindful of the fact that we need to operate this program at or near our historic average flight rate of about 4.5 a year in order to finish the station assembly job, and we fully intend to do that, which is why in some of our previous flows since I've become administrator, I've made the point in most of these press conferences that I am willing and have assumed from time to time some additional programmatic risk, not human risk, but programmatic risk on given decision-making opportunities in order to move the flow along. Because it's not our intent to be making decisions now which, looked at through a stovepipe, are maybe the best and most perfect decision we could make at this moment, but which would have consequences for some other manager sitting in this chair 3 or 4 years from now. Okay, we need to make our decisions mindful of the fact that the reason we are flying shuttle is to finish the assembly of the station, the entire assembly of the station, and that the last flight counts just as much as the one we're doing right now.
Again, I don't look at it that way at all. We've got a tremendous amount of work in front of us. Go over in the SSPF and look at all the stuff that needs to go fly, and that's not near term. We got a lot of work to do. We got a lot of things to put in place, and then we're going to work with our partners to get their modules up and do a lot of activities on board station. So I don't look at it as this is an approaching the end. I mean, this is probably one of the best times we've ever had to really be in a posture to learn and to again kind of jumpstart the next program to begin. So this is really, in a sense, a beginning, much more than the way you describe it. We've got huge challenges, and it may not go exactly like we have it scripted. And again, I think that's important for us, too, that we're going to learn through this process to be resilient and roll with the punches, as Mike Weinbach described earlier, to make this thing happen. And that's what's neat about this team, is they love the challenges, and they love the work in front of them, and that's what drives them and motivates them. So I don't think there's any better time to be here doing what we're doing. And I don't think of this as being the beginning of the end. This is the beginning of the beginning.
Yeah. Okay, let's go all the way in the back on this side.
Hi, Elliot Clemmer from the Palm Beach Post. The flying foam that you saw at 407, did you see any indication that it actually struck the spacecraft? And could you also explain in lay terms why at that stage in the ascent it's not really a threat to the spacecraft?
You know, as I said before, I have not seen the video myself, and the folks that passed on the information to me didn't indicate that there was any kind of debris that struck the orbiter. So I don't know the answer to your question, but again, Wayne will be here at 4 p.m. this afternoon, and he will know, and so he'll share all that information with you.
I'll do the lay terms explanation. What we're talking about here is exactly what happens if you, which you should never do, throw a wad of paper out your car window while you're moving along. The speed of the airstream outside the car picks up the wad of paper and moves it relative to your car to the rear at a substantial velocity, because you've got a good wind outside when you're driving along at 60 miles an hour. When we launch a space shuttle, of course, they end up going quite fast. But when we get above the sensible atmosphere, the atmosphere that you could feel if you put your hand out into it in any significant way. When we get above the sensible atmosphere, there is no aerodynamic force to speak of that would grab that paper wad or piece of foam or whatever and sweep it back into the wing at a high velocity. And when we reach that point, what we call the aerodynamically sensitive transport time, or aerodynamically significant transport time, when we reach that point, we've reached the point where there's just not enough sensible atmosphere to create a significant velocity on a piece of foam which falls off, and at that point, it doesn't matter anymore. Was that helpful? Okay.
Okay. Any more questions? Seth?
Seth Bornstein, Associated Press. Administrator Griffin, you talked a little while ago about what we have as a world human spaceflight program. You're heading off to China soon. Can you tell us where you see China's role here and what specifics are you going to be talking about?
You've got the cart way out in front of the horse. It's so far out in front of the horse I can't see the cart. No NASA administrator has been to China. We've never had any significant discussions with China about space. This is a get acquainted session, and it is nothing more, and to characterize it as anything more would be to create expectations that would be possibly embarrassing to us or embarrassing to China, and none of us wants to do that. We want to use this visit to get acquainted and look for and maybe consider opportunities where we could work together.
Okay, Irene.
I also have kind of a tangential question, but I'll ask Bill Gerstenmaier instead. I'm just wondering what you thought about the prospect of a tourist being on the space station at this time during a very dynamic assembly period.
Again, I think it's okay from an overall standpoint. You know, we've planned for this, and the station's pretty stable configuration, and we'll get the truss added during this week, and it'll be fine.
Okay, Todd.
Todd Halverson of Florida Today. I don't know, maybe for Gerst. What is your latest thinking on how long you want to keep CSCS capability in place in terms of, you know, the ability to launch rescue missions if need be?
I think we're going to, you know, we've been kind of planning to keep it around through all the remaining shuttle flights, and we'll see how that occurs. You know, we can fairly, I got to be careful, my tank friends will not say that this is easy, but we can, in some way, it comes about pretty naturally through our processing flow of where we've got the flights, that it comes about without a fair amount of undue trouble for us, and I think it's a good safety net for us to keep around. So we're going to go ahead and try to keep it throughout the program and see how it fits and plays out. And we may make some deviations somewhere along the line, but I think in general it fits throughout the remainder of the flight.
Okay, that's it. Thank you very much for.
Nach 2 Wochen Verzögerung ist das amerikanische Shuttle jetzt auf dem Weg zur internationalen Raumstation ISS. Vor knapp 2 Stunden hob Atlantis von der Startrampe in Cape Canaveral ab. An Bord sind 6 Astronauten. Sie sollen unter anderem 2 Sonnensegel an der ISS montieren.
NASA says it was a flawless day that was worth the wait. The crew of 5 men and 1 woman have a tough mission ahead. They will resume construction of the International Space Station for the first time since the Columbia disaster in 2003. 4 planned launches had to be scrubbed, one because of a lightning bolt that hit the launch pad, another due to a tropical storm, and then there were problems with the shuttle's electrical system and fuel gauge. For more now on the launch and the mission ahead, let's go live to CNN's Daniel Seberg at Florida's Kennedy Space Center. Daniel, finally at the last moment that they could launch, they launched.
Yeah, Relisa, they were running out of time in this launch window. Today was the last opportunity they had before they would have to pick it up several weeks from now. They had a rough couple of weeks leading up to today's launch with some technical issues and some weather issues. In case you missed it, almost exactly 2 hours ago, we will replay now for you the launch of Shuttle Atlantis.
5, 3 main engines up and burning. 2, 1,
and liftoff of Space Shuttle Atlantis, opening a new chapter in the completion of the International Space Station for the collaboration of nations in space.
So it was a picture-perfect day here at Kennedy Space Center in terms of the weather. No technical problems were reported on the way up. NASA saying they're very happy. They're actually just completing a press conference saying they're very happy with what they've seen with the launch of Atlantis. About 2 minutes in, we watched as the solid rocket boosters that provide the thrust separated off that massive external fuel tank that contains the super-cooled liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen covered in that what looks to be orange foam. And so at this point, NASA is saying they're extremely happy now as Shuttle Atlantis heads towards the International Space Station. They will dock there at about 6:45 a.m. Eastern Time and begin its 11-day mission to begin reassembly of the International Space Station. Ralitza?
Daniel, one thing that they were watching very closely was whether any foam particles fell off during that launch. What is NASA saying about that?
Yeah, this has been a major concern, of course, since 2003 with Columbia. NASA has installed a number of cameras, both on the ground, on the shuttle, and up on the International Space Station. What we saw was a small piece of what we believe was foam or debris come off the external fuel tank. Now, we have to put this in context to be very clear here. There is a small window of time when this is very, very important. It's the first 135 seconds, or a little over 2 minutes after launch. If any pieces of foam, depending on the size has to be calculated as well, but if they come off at that time period and strike the orbiter, then there could be a serious concern. What we need to point out with this video is that this piece came off after 4 minutes. Now, why does that matter and why is that not as important? That's because after 4 minutes, the shuttle and the external fuel tank at that point are in what's called microgravity. The forces of thrust and gravity are less at work on any type of foam that would come off. So the bottom line is that NASA has said in this press briefing they believe this is nothing. There is an extremely good chance that this means absolutely nothing in terms of the safety or the risk to any of the crew on board. Nonetheless, they will be reviewing this tape, this video, along with hundreds, if not thousands, of other images to make sure everything is okay. But the bottom line is that it really happened at a point that's outside their window of concern. So it's just one of those things that they have to look at. They are not surprised. Foam coming off is not unexpected. It has to do with the time period, and at this point it certainly seems like it's nothing to worry about. We can't officially say that until later today. Lisa?
All right, Daniel Sieber, thank you very much.
Fähre Atlantis ist in Cape Canaveral in Florida ins All gestartet. Sie soll Bauteile zur internationalen Raumstation ISS bringen. Wegen schlechter Wetterbedingungen und technischer Probleme war der Start mehrfach verschoben worden.
Im 5. Anlauf gelang ein Bilderbuchstart. Um 11:15 Uhr Ortszeit zündeten die Raketen und brachten die alternde Raumfähre in den nur leicht bewölkten Himmel. Zur Ladung gehört ein 17,5 Tonnen schweres Bauteil mit Solarzellen für die internationale Raumstation ISS. Die Montage dieses Gitters wird 3 Spaziergänge ins All verlangen und gilt als eine der technisch schwierigsten Aufgaben in der Geschichte der Raumfahrt. An Bord der Atlantis sind 6 Astronauten, darunter ein Kanadier und eine Frau. Winkend und mit einem fröhlichen Hi Mom verabschiedete sie sich vor dem Einstieg in die Atlantis. Im NASA-Kontrollzentrum war die Erleichterung nach den vielen Rückschlägen der letzten Wochen deutlich zu spüren. Wir haben heute einen fehlerlosen Countdown und einen grandiosen Start erlebt. Aber es war ein langer Weg bis dahin. Mit dem heutigen Flug beginnt die zweite Bauphase an der bisher nur halbfertigen Raumstation im All. 2010 soll die ISS vollständig sein und dann soll auch die Shuttle-Flotte ausgemustert werden. In 11 Tagen ist die Rückkehr der Atlantis zur Erde geplant.
NTD Eastern Flight. Okay, launch director is ready for discussion with you on 231 for window determination. PLT, OTC, air to ground 1. Clear hardware, caution, warning memory, and verify no unexpected errors. PDR, OTC, air to ground 1. The only constraint I show is RTLS weather. We have 2 go tau sites. And we're just waiting on RTLS weather. So I'm going to come around the room and get a go-no-go for launch. And then we'll work on the RTLS weather and make sure we get a good RTLS forecast. So go-no-go for STS-115 launch. FIDO, let us go. Guidance, go. GC, go. The prop, go. GNC, go. Banks,
go.
Eagle, go. Econ, go. FAO, go. ACO, go. DPS, go. INCO, go. PDRS, go. Surgeon, go. Booster, go. Station flight, we go. I copied station flight as go. That's correct. Capcom, go. Okay? Yes, I'd like to see if there are any updates to any of our launch window times and or holdback times. No updates to the launch window or the drain back hold time. Okay, copy that, and we'll go ahead and initiate putting the preferred time in place. I copy NTD, and just so you know, the G1 launch target uplink will not be required. Okay, so with that, we have a go RTLS forecast, and we have a go observation. That's affirmative. Okay, thanks, Tim.
There's no time limit on here, so I need to talk to the LCC limits, but other than that, we are good to go at this time. It's not a constraint to launch.
Okay, and I guess question for you, maybe even for the STMS is, how long are we going to let the folks continue to troubleshoot this before, I guess there would be some concern at some point to try to tie in the generator back into the system because we don't want to cause a hiccup in the power system.
Regarding the TALs in Zaragoza, they report a large dark CB northwest of the field moving east with an attached anvil that may encroach upon the approach corridor. So Zaragoza is likely no-go on the forecast. Marone has an area of thunderstorms about 60 miles north of the field. For the last 2 hours, those have not shown much southerly motion at all. So they're very confident that they will stay clear of the Marone airspace. And in Istris, similar report, the CBs are to the east, 40 miles and greater in distance from the field and not approaching within the last 2 hours. Again, high confidence that the airspace will remain clear there of thunderstorms. So Marone and Istris are both go.
Okay, thanks for the summary. Very good. Again, good summary. Worked by all those folks. Stan, Steve, and Zena. We wish you all the best luck in the world. Godspeed, and we'll see you back here in about 2 weeks.
We appreciate the work and the effort to make the launch window. It's been almost 4 years to run launch missions, some other non-contractors and individuals. We take a shuttle and run back where we are right now. And that's almost over the STS-115. What happens is that over the next few weeks and a few years, for that matter, that's going to move into population of hundreds of our friends around the world that are willing to wait and that time. We're ready to get work.
Thank you, Brent. Great words, and good luck, guys.
Flight Max 3, good APUs.
Copy 3, good APUs. Close and lock your visors and initiate O2 flow.
Flight booster locks, tank at flight pressure.
Copy locks, tank at flight pressure. 1 minute, 30 seconds. Let's go for auto sequence start. 25. 20. 15.
All vents open.
10. CLS, go for main engine start. Copy vents. Liftoff confirmed. Copy liftoff.
Textile testing personnel, may we come back to their normal command channel to this?
Roll forward.
Atlantis, roll.
Roger, roll, Atlantis. So left straight 104. Go at throttle up. Atlantis, Houston, go at throttle up. SRB SEP. Copy staging. Two-engine Maroon. Two-engine Maroon. Atlantis, Houston, two-engine Maroon. See potential ice in the high load. L1 high load duct feeder to AB. Okay. Photo. Press to ATO, fine. Atlantis, Houston, press to ATO, select Distress. Off and back to GPC. Okay, A off and then GPC on the FES. I'm ready. Atlantis, Houston, press to MECO, and we're seeing good cooling on FES Tri-Alpha. MECO confirmed. Copy MECO. Nominal MECO, ohms 1 is not required. Okay, we'll give them that right after the plus X. ET SEP. Copy. Flight prop plus X in progress. Copy. And ECOM to DPTDT. If I just oppose MECO transmit, no action. Copy, no action on DPDT. Atlantis, Houston, nominal MECO, ohms 1 is not required, and no action on the cabin DPDT. Prop, you want to run this as written, except for tail only control? No tail only control flight, everything else as written. Okay, and Eagle, ECOM, and MAX. No deltas for Eagle, no deltas for ECOM.
No deltas for MAX.
And guidance will be 105 as written at the bottom of the page. We'll be ready for it. Flight GMC, we're in the pitch up. Copy in the pitch. And ECOM, will you be go for APU high shutdown? That's firm. FES has been stable. Duct temps, they're not taxonominal, but they're recovering. Okay. So we're go. All right. So when they call, he's go for APU high shutdown. Atlantis, Houston.
Go ahead.
Yeah, we're getting close to handing over to the orbit team. We're wondering if you had a status of the windows and if you're ready for the preliminary debris report.
Yeah, it's dark out right now. The windows seem fine. Last time we looked, we can call one down later. But yeah, you can go ahead and give us a preliminary debris report.
Okay, the first event that we have reported is at 4 minutes and 5 seconds, which is well past the aerodynamic sensitive time and very little Q-bar. And it's a piece of foam, we think, outboard of the LOX feed line. Another piece at about 5 minutes and 27 seconds. And then we think we saw some ice post-MECO. Some of those look like they might have, the foam at 4 minutes and 5 seconds may have hit the underside of the starboard part of the vehicle, but from the resolution that we had, it didn't look like there was any damage.
Okay, that sounds good. That's good news that it all came off later than the area of the time of interest, so we'll wait for the details, and we're heading for the on-orbit ohms burn procedure.
Okay, yeah, and just reiterating that that's just a preliminary report, and we're going to hand over to the orbit team, and on behalf of the Ascent team worldwide, it was a pleasure working with you and your crew.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun for us too. Look forward to working with the most of the same folks on entry, and glad some folks are getting to travel home today as well.
The Capcom or spacecraft communicator Rick Davis called up to the Expedition 13 crew members, Commander Pavel Vinogradov, and flight engineers Jeff Williams and Tomas Ryder, to let them know that Atlantis and her crew were on their way. We can replay that audio that was called up on the Space to Grounds here on NASA television now. That happened right after launch, and Atlantis' insertion into orbit. Launch occurred on time this morning at 10:15 a.m. Central Time, and here's that audio of Rick Davis talking with Jeff Williams.
And Rick, you were cut off in your last transmission.
Oh, Jeff, just to let you guys know, everything's going beautifully, and looks like you've got some company heading your way.
All right, great news. Time to get to work.
I think you guys are going to get a little busy here for a while.
For Pavel and I, will be busy until we're resting on the steps of Kazakhstan, I think.
This is Mission Control Houston, now watching video that was recorded by the crew on board Atlantis of the external tank after it fell away from the orbiter after main engine cutoff. This video is being downlinked to Mission Control, so imagery analysts and engineering experts can review it and assess the foam coverage on the external tank. This all added to a compilation of imagery and data that helps the experts determine the integrity of Atlantis' heat shield, the thermal protection system that is in place to protect the orbiter when it enters into the Earth's atmosphere again at the end of the mission. And this is a view inside the laboratory module of the International Space Station after Atlantis launched, when the crew members were able to watch replays on computers inside the lab, with Atlantis and her crew on its way to the space station, scheduled to arrive early Monday morning. Astronaut Jeff Williams is in the foreground, cosmonaut Pavel Vinogradov in the center, and European Space Agency astronaut Tomas Ryder in the background. Williams and Vinogradov have been on board the space station for about 163 days now, wrapping up their mission soon. Ryder just arrived at the station this summer aboard the STS-115 mission in the Space Shuttle Discovery, and will stay aboard until December, when the STS-116 mission is scheduled to bring up his replacement, astronaut Sunita Williams.
This is a view of the left-hand payload bay door coming open. In the foreground, the P3, P4 truss element, the main focus of the Atlantis' mission to deliver that 35,000 pound truss structure to the International Space Station. Also in the center portion, the shoulder joint of the shuttle's remote manipulator system, the robotic arm, that will see an extensive amount of work throughout this mission. The first part of its operation will be a little bit later today, when it's checked out before the crew goes to bed, in preparation for tomorrow's extensive investigation and inspection of the shuttle's wing leading edge panels.
This is Mission Control Houston with a live view of the Space Shuttle robotic arm being operated by the Space Shuttle Atlantis crew, with a checkout of the RMS, or the remote manipulator system, the arm itself. It is being checked out by astronauts Chris Ferguson and Dan Burbank for its use during this mission. First use will be to inspect Atlantis' thermal protection system tomorrow, using the other boom on Atlantis, the orbiter boom sensor system, which was also built in Canada. The shuttle robotic arm will also be used to remove the major payload from Atlantis' cargo bay, the P3, P4 truss structure, which weighs about 35,000 pounds, will be removed from the payload bay with the shuttle arm and handed over to the station robotic arm for installation on the outboard end of the station's truss structure. The Space Shuttle Atlantis is orbiting about 196 statute miles over Africa, and some thunderstorms are seen on the surface of the Earth below.
Good day and welcome to today's STS-115 Ascent Quick Look Imagery Briefing. Today we have with us Space Shuttle Program Manager Wayne Hale to discuss with you the outcome of today's imagery recording process. Wayne?
Thanks. It's really nice to be over here again to talk to you, and this is going to be a really quick briefing because I've got really very little to tell you. And I came with no pictures, so that's kind of a sad thing, but I don't have anything other than aesthetically beautiful shots that I just got finished looking at over in the photo lab. We have, to put this in context for just a second, as you know, we're very worried about foam in particular, but also other kinds of debris, ice, or other things that might come off in the phase of flight from shortly after we lift off up through what we call the end of our aerodynamic sensitive time, which is about 2 minutes and 15 seconds after launch. During that time period, there's enough energy generated because you're moving in a lower dense atmosphere that anything that comes off can be thrown against, potentially against the orbiter with sufficient kinetic energy to damage the thermal protection system. Things that come off very early in the ascent phase probably don't have that much kinetic energy. We are sometimes worried about things that get blasted off the launch pad if you had loose material. And so we pay a lot of attention to bolts or nuts or anything that might be loose on the launch pad. We're very careful, walk down to make sure there's nothing there that could potentially be thrown up during the launch phase and hit the orbiter or the external tank or any of the other parts of the vehicle. And then after about 2 minutes and 13 seconds, or shortly after solid rocket motor separation, 2 minutes 15 seconds, we have determined that there just isn't enough air left at those altitudes. You get up above about 200,000 feet. There just isn't enough air up there to transport anything that comes off with any velocity that could lead to enough energy to damage your thermal protection system. We do know that some of the foam releases are caused by the little gas bubbles that are trapped underneath the foam in what we call voids or defects, and then as that heats up, it pops the foam off with some pop-off velocity, a highly technical term. Those pop-off velocities can be, 5, 10, 15 feet per second, but those velocities are very low as opposed to the several hundred feet per second that you get early on for debris that might come loose and get caught in the airstream. So the kinetic energy is the square of the velocity, and that's what causes the damage. What we saw today, what we've seen to date today has been very good. We saw nothing of any consequence or anything that's made the reports before 4 minutes and 7 seconds into the flight. Now, at 4 minutes and 7 seconds, you're almost in orbit in terms of altitude. You're approaching or right at about 300,000 feet in altitude. Now, you think about a normal jet airliner flying at 30,000 feet, which is what you get flying from city to city. That's 10 times higher. There just isn't any air up there. So anything that comes off that late is of no consequence from the debris standpoint or damage to the thermal protection system standpoint. One of the things that we're learning with these cameras is, among other things, the time of debris release. We have based a lot of our engineering analysis on the ET umbilical well photos that show the condition of the tank at separation. I was hopeful to show you those photos on this mission, but unfortunately they haven't come down yet. I'm sure we'll have them by the morning, and you'll have them in the morning, but they have not been downlinked by the crew at this time. The crew's getting ready to go to bed, or maybe already has gone to bed at this point. So we probably won't have those photos in the next little bit. But all of our analysis about debris losses from the foam come from those ET separation photos. That tells you that you had something come off. You don't know when it came off during the launch phase, and you don't know if it all came off in one piece. So what we're learning from all of these camera views that we have installed is when this foam comes off and in what size, because obviously the smaller the size, the less hazard it is. So I've got about 5 things in the report from the teams. And remember, we have a team at the Kennedy Space Center, we have a team at the Marshall Space Flight Center, and we have a team at the Johnson Space Flight Center. All 3 teams are pouring through this immense amount of data, not only from the LO2 feed line camera that gives you those great pictures all the way through launch, but all of the ground cameras. They have been looking at all this high-definition television footage that was shot earlier today. I hope we're going to release some of that, because there are some really spectacular views showing the beauty and power of this launch system, but fortunately not showing much in the way of debris. So let me run down the list. Here's the list that we've got so far. At 4 minutes and 5 seconds, we saw an event of spray of foam debris, apparently foam debris, with multiple potential impacts to the orbiter's starboard side, potential impact to the belly tile area, potential single debris impacts in the wing glove area, and multiple pieces of debris seen originating outboard of the LO2 feed line and falling aft. Debris possibly impacts the orbiter. No damage noted on any of the potential impacts. So the story is, when you look at these things which occur, a little stream of dribbly stream, actually a couple little dribbly streams of foam particles coming off, clearly are small pieces, clearly come off with a low pop-off velocity. Clearly there's no air at that altitude, so there's no energy, so even if they do strike different places on the underside of the orbiter, there's no hazard. Okay? That was the first event at about 4 minutes and 5 seconds, plus or minus 2 seconds. Then at 5 minutes and 28 seconds, which is another almost minute and a half later, event is a spray of debris first seen outboard of the LO2 feed line. Debris falls outboard and aft in front of the starboard wing. Debris possibly impacts the orbiter, no damage identified. Kind of same song, second verse. Third report is actually post, or at the time we separate from the external tank at 8 minutes and 44 seconds. A single piece of what is suspected to be ice originating from the umbilical area, which is where the pipe makes up between the external tank and the orbiter, travels forward along the orbiter's fuselage and appears to impact the port bipod, you know, the bipod in the front that connects the orbiter to the tank, and is deflected upwards toward the orbiter, and it impacts the fuselage near the side of the nose gear landing door. The debris appears to change direction, but no damage seen at the impact site. Again, I watched that video. The speed is slow, the energy is low, there's no damage to the tile where this apparently struck. We're going to get really good pictures of all the tile when we get close to the space station. And so those 3 are the impacts. The radar at 5 minutes and 40 seconds, which is just far enough away from that other event that was reported from the camera, did see a return, but there's no way of knowing whether that's correlated with any of this foam or a different issue, and we'll continue to look through the ground-based cameras and see if we get a correlation there. And finally, the last thing that I've got, we had one of the paper covers over the thrusters. You know, we put the paper covers over the reaction control system thrusters to keep the rain out. This time we were a little worried because we were missing one of those covers. It came off after the storm. Night before last, we didn't have any rain last night. That's a really good thing. No water in that thruster. Today, those covers are supposed to come off by about 13 seconds into flight, if memory serves me well. We had one hang on to 16 seconds into flight. It appeared from my uneducated eye that perhaps the little parachute that's supposed to pull up early had become detached, and so it held on a little bit longer than it should have. Did not appear to strike anywhere on the orbiter, not near the windows or any of those places we're worried about. So that's a non-issue. And so the bottom line is we are looking at nets, nothing of any remote consequence. The reason I don't have any pictures for you is there's just nothing to look at here, folks. Of course, we will inspect the underside of the orbiter, the entire heat shield system with our fine-tooth comb inspection systems, and prove that there is nothing that caused any damage. The thing that this does give us is it says a couple of things. Number one, we got a really good tank here. Looks like we got a really good performance from the tank. I will reserve final judgment on that until we get the ET umbilical well photos down and can parse over them in fine detail. But it is telling us a lot more about time of release and the fact that these come off in small particles, size of release. So both of those things bode very well for saying that we are reducing the risk and flying a safer and safer ascent profile. So that's the whole story, guys. I'm sorry there's not much there. There's nothing very visual to look at. Over the next couple of days, I'm sure we're going to release some of the HDTV stuff. And we took a lot of looking at birds flying around. We took a lot of looking at Tyvek covers coming off, the thrusters. And there just is not very much other than what us geeky engineers get excited about to look at. There are some really spectacular shots of the shock plumes as the vehicle goes supersonic, which will probably be on calendars or posters coming to a store near you sometime. But other than the aesthetics, there wasn't much to look at. There you are.
Okay. Thanks, Wayne. We'll take some questions here. I understand we also have a couple of questions at Johnson Space Center in Houston. Please, as usual, remember to state your name and affiliation, and we'll start off with Mark.
Mark Carreau from the Houston Chronicle. Are there any estimates at this point of mass or size that correlates to any of these? And I gather what you're saying at this point, you're really not alarmed by what you've seen, but you're going to withhold judgment until you go through the whole process.
Well, you know, not only am I not alarmed, I'm really at ease after looking through this video. Again, what we're mostly looking at here for these late time periods, greater than 4 or 5 minutes, you're getting past the area that the ground cameras can really see anything. We're relying on that LO2 feedline camera. You recall that camera's got a nice fisheye lens on it, so things are kind of distorted, and it is almost impossible to get a mass estimate of what you're seeing from that camera. We'll get our mass estimates from the ET umbilical well photo, where they take the precise photos as we separated, and the photo lab folks can put all their computer tools and compute, you know, whatever piece of foam is missing, and they will get us a fairly accurate mass estimate over the course of the next couple of 3 days.
Okay, John, you right there. Seth, that's fine too.
Well, you could have it, Seth. John Johnson, LA Times. Just out of curiosity, I mean, this is the second mission in a row when we've had foam fairly late. And it seemed to me that if it was going to come off, it would come off earlier when the wind velocity is higher. Why is it coming off so late? Do you know?
I'm glad you asked that question, John. We've talked about that a lot. It's got to do, we believe, with the heat soak back. You know, this foam gets very hot during ascent from the heating, and as time goes on, that heat, and we're only talking a few minutes, the heat soaks back into the material and gets down into little voids. Now remember what foam is. It's mostly open space. There's a little bit of material around air bubbles, if you want to think about it. We call a defect in the foam where that open space is bigger than we want it to be, and there's maybe less structure to hold the foam together. But those little air pockets get warm down underneath, and because the temperature goes up, the gas pressure goes up, and that pops the foam off. That's the leading cause, and so later is better from everybody's standpoint.
Okay, Seth.
Seth Borenstein, Associated Press. Wayne, just because you don't have much of a historical window to compare this to, I guess, two flights, where does this fall on the two extremes that you saw at this point in 114 and 121, where in 121, you guys were searching for stuff and couldn't find anything? Is this as clean, cleaner, less clean?
Well, okay, I would really like to look at that ET umbilical photos data before we make any kind of judgment like that. But what we've seen certainly tends toward the clean side.
Okay. Jay, I think I saw your hand up there.
Jay Barber with NBC. Wayne, 48 seconds, it appears that there is a piece coming off the backside of the tank, moving away, not hitting the orbiter. And I believe that was about 23,000 feet, Mach 107, somewhere in there. Did you see that?
What I saw in about that time frame, and it may not be exactly what you're referring to, but what I saw is something that the imagery folks say they see fairly typically, thought to be a little piece of ice or baggie coming off the umbilical area or perhaps off the base heat shield. You know, it's interesting that the main engines that burn 6,000 degree combustion on the inside, we do such a good job of cooling them that ice forms on the outside. And a little piece of ice or baggy debris that comes off and then flies into that plume of the engine, very hot exhaust, makes a huge flare. And so I did see one like that. Folks confirmed that it was probably ice, not anything off the external tank. And that was fairly typical, and they see that fairly often, and it's not considered to be a significant or even very notable event. That was from a ground-based camera. Yeah, that's what we were looking at, HD TV from a ground-based camera.
Okay. Back along the wall to Todd.
Yeah, Todd Halverson of Florida Today. I'm wondering, I'm kind of curious, whether the radar you have picked up the same events that the cameras picked up, and what your thinking is now on the utility of the radar to help you out for going back to night launches.
Well, it's fairly early on. They're going to do a data fusion exercise over the next few days to try to correlate all the camera views, the radar, and we've got 3 radars, debris radars tracking the vehicle, and also the wing leading edge impact detection sensor to see if there's any correlation between any events on any of those sensors. And we'll tell you what we know when we know it there. Right now, I don't have a correlation. I should always remind everybody, very early on, this whole photo review takes several days. They won't even get the film back until tomorrow. The film gives us the best resolution from the cameras. We have upgraded from standard television to HD TV, which is better, but it's still not as good as the film. So the whole team is going to spend the next 3 or 4 days going through this data. And it's important for future flights. Again, to ensure the safety of this flight, we do that thermal protection system inspection. And so whether we were missed or grazed or head damage, we will know that at the end of a couple of 3 days. So.
Todd.
Thank you. Todd Malik with Space.com and Space News. Well, I was just curious, I guess, based on what you've seen from this quick look, are the releases that you're seeing pretty much the typical ones that you expect to see in any regular flight, and does it give you confidence that you won't have to insert an extra day in there for focused inspection?
Well, as to focused inspection, we do that based on what we see on the flight day 2 and 3 inspections. And, certainly I'm hopeful that we won't have any areas of interest to look at in the focused inspection, but it's a little early to make that call.
Let's see, come out here to Tom.
Tom Costello with NBC. Does this give you some feeling of vindication that perhaps you may have gone a long way towards getting this problem licked with the foam, and would it give you more confidence to launch in the evening or at nighttime in December?
This certainly goes toward both of those. We have made a number of improvements in the application of foam at our manufacturing facility outside New Orleans, and we have some more design work in progress. And the fact that we're getting what appears to be good performance, and I will again suspend judgment until we get all the data in. But at this point, appears to be good performance, and it does make us feel pretty good that we can proceed to relieving the daylight launch requirement. As a matter of fact, I should tell you, we don't have a daylight launch requirement on the books for flights after this one. So it would be an imposition of us. If we saw something really untoward this time, we would go off and do that.
Elliot Conrad, Palm Beach Post. I just want to make sure I got this in order. 405 debris comes off the tank and then strikes the underside on the right side of the orbiter.
Right.
At 5:28 and 8:44, something comes off also and strikes the orbiter. In all cases, do we know whether it was foam or ice?
The last one, 8 minute and 44 second one, we're suspecting that that was ice. The earlier ones, the suspicion would be foam. And again, all of those occurred at such a low velocity with such a low energy that we suspect no damage was done, and certainly none was observed. So this is good news.
And then look here to the front with Warren, and then we'll probably go to JSC and take our question from there.
Warren Leary, New York Times. There were some pictures shown about an hour ago of the external tank falling away from taken by the crew. Have you guys had a chance to do a quick look at those, number one? And number two, on the way up, there seemed to be a lot of flexing of the LOX feed line, more than I think we've seen before. It was a lot, really jimmering along. Is that a concern that someone has seen that kind of flexing going on?
Well, you know, if you've watched the last couple of flights, I think we saw a very similar vibration or flexing in that line. So that is as expected, and it's as designed. And really, if you look at the attachment brackets that we've got that hold that big 17-inch diameter pipe on the outside of the tank, they're made for that kind of flexing and vibration to go on, so that's not outside the usual. The crew handheld came down just as I was leaving the photo lab. I think there is a little bit of disappointment that we're probably not going to be able to get a lot of data out of that. So it's really that digital photography from the ET umbilical well cameras that we're going to be looking forward. The thing you can say from those photography is there's nothing really big showing up. I'm not sure how much more you can say than that.
Okay. Turns out we have no questions from JSC, so back of the room, Bill?
Okay, so yes, just follow Warren's question real quick. I too thought the LOX line looked like it was doing a little more vibrating. And then I was wondering, did a high Q ascent, excuse me, would that by definition make the aerodynamic environment a little bit more intense?
Well, by definition, flying the higher dynamic pressure will make the aerodynamic condition more intense. I don't know if that translates directly to pipe vibration. I think it has more to do with pumping half a ton of fluid per second through that pipe than it probably does with the aerodynamic environment. I mean, that's, if you've ever been around a pumping station where you're pumping large quantities of fluid through a pipe, there's a lot of vibration going on, and a good engineering practice would take that into account when you design the facility and its attachments. So I'm not too worried about it.
Just for my own clarification, though, with the absence of a power ramp, though, even that wouldn't make any difference given the structural specifications anyway, I guess.
Yeah, the PAL ramp was there to protect principally the pressurization lines, the small pipes, and a cable tray, which you can just barely see along the edge of that picture. That 17-inch line was never protected by the PAL ramp. That's always been kind of hanging out there. So.
Okay. Seeing no further questions, we'll call this a briefing. I want to thank you all for coming, and we'll return you back to live coverage of the STS-115 mission from the Johnson Space Center in Houston.